everyone. My name is Kelly Barrett Sarama. Thank you so much for joining us today for one of our live presentations. I am an attorney with the Center for Elder Law and Justice, and I work in the Healthcare Advocacy Unit. And what I'm going to talk today about are some general tips and things to consider when planning for long-term care. I'll talk about what I mean when I say long-term care, various types of insurance that is available and ways to pay for long-term care, and some general tips and things to keep in mind. I will also direct your attention to a lot of helpful materials that we have on our website that are some frequently asked questions and other blogs and materials. I'll explain what might be available to you and useful to you on our website to check out. And then, as always, for any kind of financial planning or personalized plans, you should consult directly with an attorney for your personalized plans. So I'm going to touch on some general information today, but everybody's finances and everybody's care needs are individualized and very specific to you, and in order to get tailored information that is most productive and useful to you, I strongly encourage everyone to give us a call and we can have an individualized chat about it. So what I mean when I say long-term care is care that you are going to need for the foreseeable future. Examples of short-term care would be if you were in a hospital and you had surgery and you needed to have some therapies or some rehabilitation in order to get yourself back on your feet and perhaps get back home. That's short-term care. When I say long-term care, I'm talking really about your day-to-day needs that you will have for the foreseeable future. And there are two primary venues that you can receive long-term care, either at home or in a community type setting like an apartment, some type of residence in the community, or an institutionalized setting such as a nursing home, adult care facility, or other type of assisted living. Just one quick thing in the chat, as the Center for Elder Law and Justice notes in the chat there, please feel free to ask your questions and I will do my best to watch for them and answer throughout. If I'm unable to answer your questions directly, or if you have individualized questions that would require some getting about your finances and specific circumstances, please feel free to give our office a call and I would be happy to set up a consultation with you. So when we're talking about the different types of care available at home versus community and how to pay for them, there's always a private pay option if and when you have the assets and resources to pay for that. But what I'm going to primarily focus on today are the types of insurances that will cover long-term care. For the aged, blind, and disabled category of individuals, and when I say age, that's defined by the law as age 65 and up. The most common types of insurances that folks have at that point are Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare is the insurance that you get at age 65 upon retirement if you qualify, or through a spouse upon their retirement if they qualify, or if you have been on Social Security disability for a minimum of 2 years. Generally, there are some other caveats there. There are a few conditions where if you have it, you may qualify for Medicare before retirement age. But typically, Medicare and Medicaid are the two insurances that we're primarily talking about. Private insurance or employer insurance have very limited options for paying for long-term care, and they are very limited to what they will cover for care in your home, and they're very limited to what they will cover on any extended basis in a nursing facility or other type of rehab facility. And most insurances do not cover any kind of room and board at assisted living facilities or any kind of regulation of that. Most people pay for assisted living facilities out of pocket. When you're talking about what Medicare covers and what Medicaid covers, for home care services, Medicare does provide what's called intermittent care in your home. It is not intended to be a long-term solution for the type of care that you may need. Medicare will cover up to 30 hours a week of skilled therapies and skilled nursing care if a doctor orders it, and if you are considered homebound. So it's pretty restrictive coverage, and it's not meant to be a long-term solution. If you are looking more for assistance with general activities of daily living, as they're called, so for example, bathing, dressing, meal preparation, household chores, what you're talking about are personal care services is how they're typically defined by insurances. And what most folks don't realize is that the Medicaid program is actually the primary payer of these types of services, both in-home and for nursing homes. So Medicaid will cover up to 24 hours of care in your home, and that care can range from the personal care needs level, where you need some help with chores and dressing, as I said, all the way up to skilled needs if you need skilled nursing and skilled therapy care in your home. You do have to screen and qualify, and there are income and asset guidelines to follow, which is something else that I want to touch on for Medicaid planning. It's generally good to know that annually there are income and asset guidelines set by the state for qualifying for the Medicaid program. In order to qualify for long-term care coverage through the Medicaid program, you have to need at least 120 days of care in a year to qualify for the Medicaid Advantage long-term care programs in your home. That seems like an odd standard to me. How do you know if you need 120 days of care? How is that measured? If you're at a point where you're needing some assistance in your home, it's worth applying or discussing what the eligibility guidelines are generally on the financial end, because on the physical needs aspect, the healthcare aspect of things, you would be screened by a nurse who is independent, not hired by any of the healthcare plans, and does not work directly for New York State. They would come to your house and go through the activities of daily living and discuss what your care needs are with you and screen you for the program and determine whether you meet that level of care. So you don't have to sit down and write down the days that you might have needed care in the past year to figure it out. There's actually an assessment that gets done by a nurse, and that involves actually sitting down with you to talk about what your specific individualized needs are for long-term care services. Through the Medicaid program, there is also a program called the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. And through this program, you can actually get some friends and family to become aides, and they can actually get paid through the Medicaid program to provide care for you in your home. A lot of times people hear Medicaid and understand that Medicaid is typically for a low-income population. But Medicaid is the primary payer of long-term care, which means that it's one of the only insurances that really covers the most extensive level of care for folks. And there are ways to qualify for Medicaid and manage being on the program if you, on paper, bring in more income than what the limits are. And there are ways to plan financially and do things with your assets in order to qualify for Medicaid and get the benefits that you need, get the care that you need to maintain your autonomy and your care in your home, and not have to deplete all of your income and resources on paying for your care, because as you can imagine, paying for long-term care can get quite expensive quite quickly. So if you are looking into home care services or at a point where you or a loved one is starting to need some help around the home, you may wish to speak to an attorney about what options might be available to get that care paid for through the Medicaid program or other insurance or local community programs that might be available. But again, Medicaid can pay for up to 24 hours of care if you screen for that level of care in your home. And a lot of people like the idea of having friends or family who might already be providing that care informally actually be trained to become aides and get paid through the Medicaid program. There are certain things that you can do with your finances. Additionally, if you have an increased income above the Medicaid limits, such as diverting your excess income into a pooled or supplemental needs trust, I'm not going to really touch too deeply on that today, because I do think it's a good idea to get an individualized consultation if you think that this is, if the Medicaid program is something that might benefit you, so that we can really talk one-on-one about what your income and assets are and ways to navigate them and get you approved or into the programs that you are looking for. I mentioned that Medicare does provide some coverage. It does provide, like I had mentioned, some intermittent care. It is not intended to be a long-term solution and does not cover the personal care level of services. So that's something to note, and another reason why you'd want to be open-minded and consider exploring the Medicaid program options, because if you are just looking for assistance with meal preparation, hygiene assistance, things like that, the Medicare program is not going to be appropriate for that. It's really the Medicaid program that's going to provide those services, or private pay options when you're talking about community-based in-home care. Some things to know for nursing home level of care. Medicare will cover short-term rehabilitation stays. Again, that is just meant to be short-term. Anything long-term care, typically considered 90 days plus, is going to be presumed to be a long-term care stay, and that's when you want to start looking at options for insurance such as Medicaid, because no other health insurance is going to pay for room and board at a nursing home. You may have private long-term care policies. Those policies typically will cover, say, up to $100 a day of care. There's always a cap to them, and strict qualifications for eligibility to actually qualify for payment from those programs. So a lot of folks do have long-term care programs that maybe they've paid into for quite a bit of time in their lifetime in order to get the care when they eventually need it. But typically they are not going to cover anything expensive, and they are not going to cover the full cost of your care. You are still going to have some cost sharing there. So you're going to want to weigh your options and look into Medicaid. The average cost of a nursing home in this region is over $10,000 a month. And that's average, so they do vary greatly. There are some that cost much more than that and some that cost slightly less. But that's an idea of what you're looking at and why you want to explore what the insurance options are for that. Medicaid is the only insurance that's going to cover room and board. You will have to contribute essentially the majority of your monthly income when you enroll in the institutionalized Medicaid program. There's a caveat for married individuals, and again, why I strongly advise everyone to have an individualized conversation, because there is a budgeting scheme that does allow for what's called spousal impoverishment protection. So the theory is that if you are married, one spouse shouldn't have to deplete all of their income and assets on the other spouse's care and not be able to remain living at home and in the community. So there are some protections and things that you can do with your assets in order to qualify for Medicaid and protect both spouses' interests there. But generally, Medicaid is going to be the insurance that you look to pay for long-term care in an institution. Now, there's an intermediate level here if you're considering assisted living or adult care facilities that will, senior apartments, things like that. Insurance is not going to pay your room and board at these places, but what insurance will do is pay for the medical cost of care. There is also a Medicaid program called the Assisted Living Program that is a very limited program. Not every assisted living facility accepts the program, but if and when they do, it helps regulate your rent if you are in this program. So essentially, it makes it so that Medicaid's not paying your room and board, but if you are in the assisted living Medicaid program, it is capping your rent at a specific level so that it's really not charging you above and beyond what your income is. So again, that's very broad and generalized, but it's just to let you know that most folks end up having to pay out of pocket for assisted living and don't realize that insurance does not pay your room and board. However, there are some limited schemes available where it can help. The program that you're in may help regulate what your rent is, so it's not above your income. So it, on paper, kind of does seem like the program is paying for your room and board. And the care at those facilities ranges greatly. There are multiple types of assisted living and senior adult care facility type settings. I would strongly recommend that everyone check out our website. We have some great guides on our website that were created through funding from the Fellow and Rebecca Fund, and one of them is called Your Guide to Long-Term Care, and it goes through the different licensures, the different levels of care at each adult care facility. It provides a lot of extensive tips on how to choose a nursing home, some things to consider when you are looking at actually choosing a nursing home to live in. It points you in the direction of ratings websites. You want to pay attention and look at the government ratings and some of the other resources available to try to understand quality of care at the facilities so that you can weigh, what your best options are. And we have a very comprehensive guide on this on our website. So I'm not going to touch comprehensively on it today, but I do want to direct everyone to those materials because they're excellent resources, and there's even some note pages in there so that if you do start to do some research on facilities and compare, you can keep notes right in the guide as well if you print it off for yourself. So some tips generally for planning what you need to know. Your finances, your income, and the assets that you have available to you are going to impact how you qualify and what different medical insurance programs you qualify for. So you want to keep good financial records. When you are to a point where you think you're going to need care either in your home or potentially in a nursing home or other setting, you want to start keeping good financial records, including keeping track of receipts for purchases, anything that is $2,000 or more in a single transaction. And the reason for that is because the Medicaid program specifically, which is, again, the primary payer in New York State for both home care and institutionalized long-term care, there are what are called Lookback Periods in order to qualify for these programs. So when you apply for Medicaid, if you need home care services starting in 2021, this is brand new, and it's unclear exactly when it is going to go into effect, but I want everyone to just consider it. The reason it's unclear is because of the current pandemic. The state of emergency has pushed back the implementation of this, but starting in 2021, right now projected to begin in April, there's going to be a 2.5-year community look-back period for new long-term care applications for the Medicaid program in the community. What that means is that with your application for Medicaid in the community for home care services, you are going to have to provide back to October 1, 2020. So 2.5 years, but there is a caveat that it cuts off and only goes retro to October 1, 2020. So it won't actually be 30 months or 2.5 years until we are 2.5 years away from October 1, 2020. So let's say in May of 2021, you go to apply for home care services through the Medicaid program. You will have to provide financial documentation retroactively to October 1, 2020. In the future, it will be all the way, from 2.5 years back. And what the county, the local Department of Social Services is looking for in that financial documentation, along with your general needs, healthcare needs, and processing the general eligibility information, they are going to be looking for anything $2,000 or more in a single transaction that was gifted or is unexplained in your financial records. They're really essentially looking to see if you have transferred or gifted assets in order to qualify for the Medicaid program. You are allowed to spend money. So let's say, during this winter you need to get a new hot water tank, and that obviously can cost a lot of money. And so they see, they're going to see a big withdrawal from your account. If you provide the receipt for that, it's going to be no problem. But if you wrote a bunch of checks for the holidays, let's say you're someone who has a habit of gifting, and this year you decided to be super generous and gift all of your children $2,000 for Christmas. We all wish, right? What a great gift. But that can negatively impact your eligibility for the Medicaid program, and so you have to be careful. You want to keep good record keeping and understand that bigger purchases are going to require an explanation. And if you have gifted money and you have not gotten anything in return for that, it is considered what is deemed a uncompensated transfer of assets, which will negatively impact your eligibility for the Medicaid program for a period of time depending on the amount transferred. So essentially, that's a lot just to say that you must keep good financial records and understand that if you're going to transfer assets or make large gifts, you may have your eligibility for the Medicaid program frozen for a period of time, depending on how much was gifted and where it went. You will have to provide explanations, and if it's ultimately determined that you gave away monies, it is going to impact your eligibility for the program. It's not an indefinite issue. So let's say you did give away $2,000 for the holidays as a gift. You say, yep, you know what, I gave that away. I expected nothing in return. It is what it is, right? Well, then there's going to be a small period of time, a couple of weeks, where the state may say, we're going to freeze your eligibility because that was money that was available that you should have used for your care and you didn't. And so because you didn't, you're not going to be eligible until X date. And they will determine that based on how much was actually gifted. In this scenario where only $2,000 was gifted, you know, it might be a couple of weeks that we're talking about that you're not eligible for the program. But in a couple of weeks, you will be able to then access the care that you need. A lot of folks don't realize that their financial transactions retroactively will impact your eligibility for the Medicaid program. So when we're talking about planning for long-term care, it's important to keep that in mind and understand that. The most common asset that I see transferred and the most common frequently asked question that I get is about housing. A lot of folks, as a future planning and estate planning measure, transfer their homes or want to transfer their homes to their adult children and retain life estates. That's okay to do, but what you want, in some circumstances, I'm not saying that should never happen, but what you need to do is really consult with an attorney before you make any of those moves for a couple of reasons. The primary reason being because you may not understand all of the negative implications that can have. You don't want to set yourself up for future failure. You don't want your access to care to be limited because you made this transaction thinking it was a smart move for your future, when really it will negatively impact how you're going to pay for both in-home care as of 2021 and nursing home care. So I mentioned that there's a 2.5-year look back in community cases. There's a 5-year look back for nursing home care, so it's even greater. You have to provide 60 months or 5 years worth of financial documentation, all your bank statements, all your property transactions, asset verification when you apply for nursing home care, currently as it stands. So that's a lot of financial records to keep track of. It's a lot of receipts that you might have to track down. That's just why it's good to keep good financial records in general, and just understand that if you're going to think about transferring anything or gifting major assets, and you think you're somebody who might need care, or that somebody you take care of might need nursing home care or home care in the future, you should call and speak with an attorney or sit down with a financial planner and really discuss what all of your options are. Because, it's important to think about what your primary goal is for wanting to make that move, and keep in mind that there might be more than one way to achieve your goal in a way that does protect that asset or does what you want with it. Of course, a lot of folks want their children to inherit their property or inherit their assets. But you also want to be able to live a good quality of life and access the care that you need, either in home or in a nursing home, without, worrying about racking up giant private pay bills or not getting access to the care that you need, which would lessen your quality of life and create a lot of issues in the future for you. So just things to keep in mind and reasons to have individualized conversations about planning. It's never too soon to start those conversations with the ones that you love or for yourself. Just get an idea of what the eligibility guidelines are for the Medicaid program or for other care programs. How are you going to pay for home care if you end up needing it, based on what your income is personally, what your retirement plans are personally, and what your health care diagnoses and needs are personally. These should be personalized plans, which is why I'm talking very broadly and generally, just to give you some ideas of things to keep in mind as you try to plan for this. One good thing, if you are significantly above resources and you think that you might need care in the future and you're not sure how to qualify without depleting everything, one thing to think about is to consider prepaying for funeral and burial costs. For example, the current resource level for a single individual to qualify for Medicaid is $15,750. So you are allowed to have $15,750 in assets. If you own a home and you're living in it, that would be exempt from that calculation. And again, I won't go too deeply into what else counts as an asset, but if you've got more than that and you're at a level where you kind of need some care and you don't want to just deplete all your assets and spend down to zero, one thing that you could do if you had, let's say, $25,000, so you had around $10,000 to spend, is consider going to pay for your funeral and burial costs in advance in the form of an irrevocable funeral agreement. You can go to any funeral home of your choosing to get something like that set up. And again, that's something that individually I'd be happy to go over with you. But if it's one thing that we throw out there as a future planning idea, if you are somewhat above the asset limit and want to know what to do with spending that money, we do have a general Medicaid information letter and a frequently asked questions blog on our website that goes into these items much more specifically, and I strongly recommend looking into. The general Medicaid letter is updated annually with the new guidelines, so typically every year the asset and income level does change. It has increased over the last several years slightly, and so we do look at that and update that annually. So a new one will be up on the website for 2021, but you can go take a look at the 2020 levels and the different things that you should keep in mind for asset transfers and pre-need funeral agreements and spending down generally. The frequently asked questions blog goes a little bit more in depth into considerations for married individuals because those cases are more challenging and really need to be specifically discussed because it depends on what each person's needs are, and it is quite often that it happens that one person needs care and one person doesn't, and the concern is what do we do and how do we not spend all of our savings on one person who needs care while depleting everything that's going to be left for the other individual. So there are those resources available as well. And as I mentioned, for anyone who might be scooping in and out here, I want to just again note that we do have a long-term care planning guide on our website as well, which goes through the different levels of care for various facilities and what all of the different insurances are and what they all cover. Does anyone have any questions? I know that this is really broad and generalized. The important thing to keep in mind is that there are different insurance options. The primary payer is Medicaid, which surprises a lot of folks because they don't think of themselves as perhaps qualifying or needing Medicaid. But there's a lot that you can do to plan financially and with an attorney in order to qualify and really get services that you need to stay at home for as long as you can and then also navigate potential future institutionalized care. You want to really think about your personal financial needs, your personal care needs, and what that looks like for you. And so if you would like to call our office, you can give me a call at 716-853-3087, and I would be more than happy to have an individualized conversation about you and your loved ones and what your situation is, what your care is looking like, and talk to you more about what you personally qualify for and some tips that you might want to do as you plan for your personal future. I hope this was helpful. I know it was very generalized. And again, please check out our website. We do have a blog that we update regularly as well. And feel free to call with any healthcare needs. Thank you so much for